Hello, my name is Parker,
And my name is Ned.
and this is the Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 11. We're recording on March 22nd. The game is out. The game is good. This episode is brought to you by Squadcast.
Not in a sponsored way, though.
Right. More of a reverse sponsorship way in that we are where we give them money.
So
but
we're just
hopefully
paying them.
we're paying
We're
them,
using their
but
product. Yeah.
we are using their product, but hopefully that leads to better audio for you, dear listener.
I
So
believe in it.
before we get into it, today's episode, Ned, let's talk about the match that we just played, the best of two.
It was interesting. It was I was playing Green Bean and Parker was playing Tarkin Red, and I think that in those two aggro decks, Green Bean, Sabine Green was absolutely able to get under the Tarkin deck. I just you stabilized in game one. You stabilized pretty well until like K2SO came out, and then followed up by For a Cause I Could Believe In. Reaching back to those Halcyon days when we were talking about archetypes, and one of the needs for aggro is reach. And I think that right now Sabine Green has, out of the aggro decks, just an absolutely perfect amount of reach between K2SO and For a Cause I Can Believe In, which I think
Yeah,
is...
no, Fachibi is perfect, but
Yeah.
I think that's my takeaway from the match.
Yeah.
I think the real threat of Sabine is that, and this is known, but it was just I was playing at my organized play last night, and I just got absolutely steamrolled by Sabine, and that the ability to get above 20, and then the automatic damage that she provides on her leader side just cinches things up, where it's that anytime you're facing inevitability. I was playing in the Saga Web League against a wonderful gentleman named Lamar earlier this week, and we got down to, I had stabilized, I control the board, I had the cards in my hand to win, and we decked out, both of us, and I was within 6 damage of death, and he was not. And it's that inevitability. I think anytime you can add that, reach is powerful, but that inevitability of just, it can't be played around, and that, like, once you're above 20 with Sabine, the game's over. Like, there's just nothing you can do unless you've also got her above 20. So.
Yeah, you just need to turn the corner right away. Like the time that you can spend with control but high base damage is not long, which I think is interesting. I know that they talked a little bit about, in our interview with Ryan Serrano, they talked a little bit about how in blue villainy, there's not as much of the restore keyword as you would see on the non-leader cards because it's on Krennic.
Secretly on Iden. Healing
Yes.
is on the blue
Yes.
villain leaders, both of them.
Yes. But you don't see it on the cards. So, and in general, villainy is probably going to be less good at restore than heroism is for, thematic reasons. But having that there means that the heroism aggro decks are just better able to get under you, especially when you're not in, like, blue leader. You just don't have as much. Yeah.
I think that was one of the first times, that's one of the few decks I've played with villainy without blue outside of Vader. And that was a unusual feeling. But I really want to kind of get up on Red Tarkin, on any Tarkin. Of my two showcases, I feel like he's the one more likely to see play this set. I have high hopes for Cassian in the future. But I what's the point in owning a showcase if you don't take them out for a spin?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking
you can't
of
leave the
owning
Ferrari
showcases,
in the garage.
and speaking of the Saga League, for dear listener, if you haven't been following along, a quick abbreviated version of my life story as it relates to TCGs. It all begins in Minneapolis. I'll jump to when I started playing card games. I got into Magic, and I was a middle school kid, and I was broke. Most middle school kids are. If you aren't a broke middle school kid, congratulations. You are one of the world's lucky few. Broke in high school, broke in college, stopped playing Magic, came back to TCGs when I started to have some money, but the whole randomized booster thing seemed like a con. So I got into LCGs, and LCGs are a level playing field. Everybody has access, caveat, to all the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my first time playing a TCG in 20 years. And as I hope is true for most people in the world, I am more financially well off than I was fresh out of college when I was 20 years old. So I am privileged enough that I can buy a not an exorbitant amount of cards, but enough cards to pad out the decks that I want to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in the Saga League uh, uh, 2 weeks ago, actually, the first match. And I was playing a player named Jacob. And I think Jacob is a better player than I am. I think he is. I think his lines of play, his analysis seemed stronger than mine. But I think my deck was better than his, not by virtue of its construction, because I stole it from the internet. I think.
I mean, I would argue that it might be better because you stole it from the internet, right? Like,
Oh,
no shame,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
zero shame in netdecking.
Zero shit. Yes.
Yeah.
But also, not just, yes, absolutely
Yeah.
agreed. It was tested by people who've played more than I have. And also, I didn't have to make any compromises in it. That one was actually due to luck. I've started with Iden. I'm maining Iden right now, in large part because I didn't have to seek out any singles for Iden. I basically fell backwards into a constructed competitive Iden deck.
Mm-hmm.
So a pretty much full bore Iden deck against a Thrawn deck that was still sporting a fair number of starter common cards is a lopsided engagement. And
Yes.
Jacob gave me a fantastic run for my money. But I felt pretty much that the match was kind of inevitable, just based on the tier of the decks. Now, I have, for years, played against people with more money than I, and I remember that feeling back in high school and college, and that was awful. And, boo-hoo me, but it also felt kind of rough on the other end. Like, I took no joy in it. It was like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't a casual night. Like, I'm toning my decks down
Sure.
for organized play where I'm just playing against people. But, the Saga League, it's a league, right? Like, in theory, you're
No,
meant to
you
be
got
taking
you
it a
got to
little
go
seriously.
all out. Yeah.
Right.
You got to go all out.
Do the best you can. And
Yes.
so I wasn't going to pull any punches, but I also felt a little bad. Like, this didn't feel like an even match, and not because of skill or experience or practice, but because of finances.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to Jacob's finances. Maybe he's loaded, but in terms of financial investment in the game, and
Yes.
I didn't like that. And so I kind of pitched. When I talked to you about that, you kind of pitched this topic, the idea of talking about financial disparities in trading card games. In
Yep.
large part, the theme of one of the themes of our shows, the sub themes, math up here at the top, a little bit down is my exploration of the distinctions between TCGs and LCGs. And one of them is that money matters as much as a certain amount of marketing may wish to ignore that. It is a fundamental truth of TCGs that people who have money have more avenues of play than people without money. And that's feels like saying the quiet part out loud, but it's, I think, a fundamental truth. And I kind of want to get into how that can possibly be addressed. And you told me you had a pitch for a topic tonight.
Yes. So I'm going to start off by saying that it is the case that there is no getting around the fact that if you are willing to spend more money and more time on some like linear combination of the two on a hobby, you are probably going to perform better than somebody who does not spend as much money and time. And that's just the way that it is. And I think that being men
and it's even more felt, I think, in a game, in a hobby that is competitive, right? Like, I mean, we're not doing pottery here. We're not gardening here. Like, there's an actual winner and a loser.
Yeah, no. In gardening, like there's always the incentive, And again, like we're men of a certain age, and so there's going to be a tendency for us.
Are you saying we
we're-
garden a lot, Ned? I mean, it's
Yes, I'm
true.
saying
That
that
is
we
one of my
guard.
other major hobbies.
Yes, I'm on the school garden committee, but
Okay, yeah.
yeah, to substitute the spending of money for the spending of time. So that's just because we have more of one than the other right now, and that's the way that it is.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with TCGs, you can think of there being like 3 layers of play, right? Where the topmost, the surface level of play is, okay, I have a deck and you have a deck, and we are making decisions within the context of the game, right? And it's important that the game is fun and you can improve your play there, but a lot of that is just practice. Like there's nothing that you can do to get. You can read and you can study and you can watch other people's games, but fundamentally it's about muscle memory, and it's about like improving your decision making quality. So you've got this layer right here.
You've talked about that before as
Yeah.
the big impediment to your spikiness is that
Yes.
you are competitive by nature, but you are not one inclined to grind at this game
No.
away forever.
Yeah, and that is like I like watching other people's games, but watching other people make decisions is not a substitute for making your own decisions. You will make better decisions the more decisions you make. So you've got that layer, and then below that you've got the layer of deck choice, right, and deck construction, and this
Meta-literacy.
Meta-literacy, and this layer is also improved by spending time, but this layer you can substitute a lot of knowledge for time, and I think that like net decking is the sine qua non of doing that, right? Like you look at lists other people have developed and you riff off of them. You either take them and you use them, or you use it as a backbone and then you do something else. And with that sort of basic concept, or it exposes you to a concept that never would have occurred to you had you not looked at the net deck. And this is something where I think, different communities come to different levels of understanding about net decking, about like the substitution of knowledge for time and focus. But I think that most competitive card games, and especially TCGs in the year 2024, people are generally okay with net decking. It was a different story back in the 90s. It was a different story back in the early 2000s. But
Before
at
the
this
net.
point, before the net, right? Like
Right. Yeah. When the idea of just going online and getting your information answered was alien. Now you can just ask. I haven't really gotten any results for SWU, but you can actually ask ChatGPT for deck suggestions, and it'll obviously hallucinate cards, and it's terrible. But like we're at a level now where you can just we assume you can casually ask the internet for anything. So why not a deck?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And then there's this third level below this.
Wait. Before you get to the third level, I just need to
Yeah.
get something on the record.
Yes.
Because this has nothing to do with the podcast, so I apologize, dear listener. This is purely for Ned and I as friends. But my brand here, Ned, is words or database. Yours is math, but I'm carving out words, and I will never not be bothered by the fact that you were the first one to use sine qua non in this podcast.
I'm sorry,
and not me. That will just smart for as long as we do the show. I will bring this up on our 100th episode. Like, why did you get there first? So, anyways, when I was a child, my first time I ever had lasagna was on a United Airlines flight, and I don't think my dad ever forgave himself for that. That was there was an oversight as a parent. Like when those little things happen, you're like, wait, how did I allow this to come to pass? How did I let the math guy, you're incredibly articulate, Ned, never let it be said that you're not, but how did I let the math guy on our show get to such a choice SAT 800, vocab word? That kills me a little. But anyways, your third point, Ned, I do want to hear.
So we've got the top layer, which is just experience. Only play can really make it better. You can read, there's some knowledge. Then you've got the second layer of deck construction and meta literacy, where play will make it better, but you can do a lot of knowledge substitution. And then this is a unique feature of TCGs. And that is you have this third layer of, even before you get to the deck construction phase, the playing field is not level. And the playing field is not level because of access to cards. And that can mean that you're in circumstances that feel crummy. Like I've generally been, having been a longtime TCG player on a extremely limited budget, I did not. I was frequently on the one side of this, and you've just experienced the other side of being the person with, the Power Glove equivalent, going into the Fred Savage video game competition.
Right, right.
Yeah,
No, and I mean, again, this goes to, if you're not listening to Unplayable, you should be, but I assume every one of our listeners does. But D House on there constantly talks about the power of community, and I think that's really right. Like crushing somebody in a truly competitive environment where is one thing, but like Saga's like on that line. Like it's not there's it's not, and it just made me feel not great. So but boohoo me, right? Like I think the true boohoo is for the let's talk about how do I overcome. I just use less of my infinite card pool. How do one thing I want to note, though, that I think is really important to note, I'm going to push back a little bit, that there's these tiers and it's not a level playing field. Yeah. But that's only in the topography. It's only in the landscape of the game as a whole, right?
Yes.
Like, I think as you kind of get deeper into the game and you progress into the game, that third and eventually even the second
layers
become less important, right? Like you're not showing up to a PQ with you're almost certainly not showing up to a PQ and planetary qualifiers, certainly not showing up to any layers above that with any concern that anybody that you're playing against is limited in their card pool, right? Like if you're playing at the higher levels, you assume everybody is running right now the card of price. I don't know if card of choice, but is Vader, right? Pushed, but more importantly, usable in every single green villainy deck. Green is the color of choice for villainy, so 50% of the decks love him. He's going for, as of this recording, $80 to $100. Thank God he was going for cheaper once upon a time. Nobody who wants 3 Vaders doesn't have 3 Vaders at a certain level, but and not just beyond money. But I think it's also worth noting that when you get to certain levels, that like deck selection, deck construction is also a reason. I mean, there's still some nuance there, but it's got to be more static. Everybody knows
generally,
right? Is that fair? That like you're going to show up to a PQ and like if you see Sabine, everybody who sees Sabine Green knows, okay, there's a bound. You might make some weird choices, but
right, and there's always rogue decks, right? But when we're dealing with the card pool that we're dealing with for SWU right now, and when we're dealing with, as the stakes get higher, the sort of water line goes up and the default assumption goes up, and that's just a function of like when you're competing at the higher levels, that's just the way that it is, and it stinks to a certain extent, but it's also a feature of TCGs, and I think that it's number one important to talk about. And number two, this is where I think this conversation comes in. Is I always had a name for the person who had all the cards, and that person was Mr. Suitcase, because they had their suitcase. The suitcase was full of cards, and they could. And when you're competing at the higher levels, everybody is Mr. Suitcase. So the term doesn't make any sense, right? Like everybody.
I was curious if Mr. Suitcase had cards or money in the suitcase.
It was cards in the suitcase, but money in the suitcase also makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So Mr. Suitcase.
Mr. Suitcase, and
so how do you be Mr. Suitcase? I mean, use less of the suitcase when you're building a community, but
yes.
I guess that's a diminishment of power. How do you deal with Mr. Suitcase is our question for the evening.
Right. And so I'm going to preface this by like a long and boring digression into my personal history, and that was
I already did that.
As a wee
you get
lad,
to do that too.
Yeah, as a wee lad, I played a lot of different card games, and I did not have a job in high school. My parents told me that I ought not to have a job in high school. I decided not to have a job in high school. for reasons that I didn't want to argue with my parents, but so much. And, you know, even in college, the first couple of years of college, I also didn't have a job in college. So my spending money was very, very thin. But I loved card games. I loved playing card games. You know, and so trying to find the balance of how to play with people who are willing to spend more money or able to spend more money than you are on card games is something that comes up. And I think that the first thing that I want to preface this by is there is nothing wrong with being Mr. Suitcase. And that if you are going to
Okay.
No, I mean, like,
I feel absolved.
Everybody has their own advantages and disadvantages. You know, people are going to commit to hobbies in different ways. Like, if I had focused on a single, you know, thinking back to my childhood, if I had focused in on a single card game rather than trying to play a bunch of card games, I probably could have had better decks in any of those particular card games that I wanted to play. But, you know, I like rules. I like lots of different card systems. So I played a lot of different games, and that was the consequence.
No, I think that's actually an excellent point that I hadn't considered, is that to the extent that I'm Mr. Suitcase, it's because I haven't played a TCG in 20 years. I haven't played a competitive LCG. After Netrunner died, I think you and I had that one weekend where we gave L5R a respectable shake. And we said no thank you. And I haven't played a competitive LCG since then. So I've got a lot of pent-up not energy and, to corollary, pent-up willingness to spend money.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of the coin, like, this is my game. I'm not playing Altered. I'm not playing Flesh and Blood. I'm not chasing down sorcery. Like, this is it. So that's also a good point, is that there are people who are probably not Mr. Suitcase who could be if they picked one game.
Right.
Okay, think it out loud.
And so,
anyway.
so that's one thing. And the other thing is, and this goes back to the conversation that I think we had a couple of episodes ago about David Serwin's playing to win and the concept of scrub, right? And one of the things about being a scrub is when you are complaining about valid strategies that other people take. Right? Like, if you show up to the planetary qualifier with your deck of cobbled together commons and uncommons and, you know, your couple of rares, you are not fighting on a level playing field, and it is incumbent upon you to understand that that is the case. It is not fair, and I am terribly sorry, but we're playing blood sport here, right? Like, you know,
we exist in a society, right now.
Yeah.
Like,
you know, and maybe I'm trilling a little bit too hard here, but I think, like, at the first level, understand that the playing field is not level, and therefore it is your job as the not Mr. Suitcase to try and scrape every advantage that you can to level the playing field. And so these are things, you know, guideposts that I have experienced that I think have been were helpful to me as a young lad and might be helpful to other people going forward, about how to deal with if other people in your play group are more willing to spend money than you are.
Okay. All right. And defining play group, I think, pretty broadly, right? Like, just even your casual OP night.
Right. Like, you know, your play group is the people that you play with. And if your play group is, you know, if your play group is your OP night, then that's one thing. If the play group is the people you play across a kitchen table from, that's another thing. If your play group
tautological claims like that. That's good. Yeah. Your play group is the people you play with. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Hot takes.
Up to
Spicy
and including
takes.
the planetary qualifier. So, like, if that's what you're doing, then
no, I actually, that's a dynamic I'm very curious to see play out, is the showdowns, actually, right? Like, planetary qualifier, those things are worth points. You know, whoever wins a PQ gets a pass. If I recall correctly, a full buy on day one of the galactic qualifiers, or it definitely gets a guaranteed invite. And I think this year, because it's open, it's whoever wins the PQ gets a guaranteed invite to the galactic qualifiers. Because the 2025 galactics are open to anybody who wants to attend, winning a PQ just gives you a buy the whole day. So there's like a strong advantage to do well, because it feeds into those higher levels. But the showdown as a introduction to competitive play, I think we're going to see a lot of gloves coming off right? You're going to have a lot of people. I'm going to mention his name again, D House from Unplayable, who like up till now, I can picture two people from the OP night who are like who are inviting, who are welcoming, who are here to develop a inclusive and holistic community, and are going to show up to those showdowns where those exclusive Mace Windows are available, presenting a very different persona and demeanor. So
Right. Yeah.
but up till, so maybe even up to showdown, not just up to PQ, but you know,
Yeah.
just but so how do you address it? Assuming at some point it becomes inaddressable, but
Yes.
up until the point where that happens.
So I think the very first thing that I will recommend is playing limited. And this is one of the reasons why I really like SWU, is because limited is an environment where everybody has an equal playing field with respect to the money that they put in. Where it doesn't matter how much, if you can afford your buy-in fee, it doesn't matter that the other person has every single card that was ever printed. They do, you know, and chase variants of all of them. You got your hyperspace showcase, you know, Boba Fett, doesn't matter. Everybody's coming in at the same level. And I think another thing that's real
packs.
Yeah, same packs. You get the same odds as everybody else. And I think another thing that's really good about it is that, especially for people who are earlier in their like TCG career, and by this I mean like understanding core mechanics, limited has an intense focus on the very core mechanics of the game, on, you know, making good attacks, on using your actions wisely, and on trying to gain those advantages. Going back to the advantage show that we talked about, like limited is a game of inches, and so you are going to get a really profound respect for those inches that you eke out, and you're going to understand the game at a very deep level, because the power of the cards is so much smaller that you have to kind of use every part of the card. And
you're saying because the cards are simpler, less pushed.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
You know, when you're playing a, you know, if you think about a very complicated to pilot deck, like I'm thinking about something like Boba Green to a certain extent, or I think
Palp.
that even in the Palp, or even in the aggro deck space, like I think Leia Green is a really hard deck to pilot. These are decks where most of the learning, and a lot of these decks are very powerful, but a lot of the learning comes on, you are learning specifics about how to pilot a specific deck, right? But because limited is a much more generic format, you are learning specific cards a lot less, and you're learning more the framework inside of which the cards exist, if that makes sense.
Okay. So it will really crystallize those skills of identifying who's to beat down, identifying when do you make inefficient trades versus efficient trades versus ignore trades. Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah, you know, how to care about card advantage, this and that, you know, when to stop resourcing, these kinds of decisions. And another benefit of limited is, in a very inefficient way, you are kind of rent to owning a deck, right? Like if you want to get into constructed, limited lets you play on a level playing field, but it also builds out your card pool. So you are spending money on, you know, again, it's a very inefficient trade, but the money that you are spending on limited, some of it does come back into your pocket in the form of cards that you pick up during drafting that you can then use to build the constructed decks that you want.
So I suspect I know the answer to this question, Ned. So I discovered, I've been aware of drafting. I don't remember when I became aware of drafting relative to my awareness of TCGs, but I only recently became aware of the idea of redrafting rares, right?
Yes.
So for the dear listener, if you're not familiar with the idea, it's just the simple idea that, you know, you're picking cards to build a deck, but you are maybe confronted with a card that is valuable, either financially or to you personally for the decks that you are building at home, that doesn't really synergize with the deck that you were building that night in the draft.
Yep.
And I always felt that was a feature that okay, you're presented with this tough choice. Do you take the card that will be good in your constructed play in the future, or do you take the card? Do you take the card that's just going to perfectly complement your all hyperspace Twin Suns deck, or do you take the card that's good tonight? And I always felt that was a fascinating tension. But apparently, at certain high levels of play, there's a concern that warps the game. That
Yes.
you want people to be only drafting the best cards for the deck they're playing that night. And that
there is a very famous example of that where at a very high levels of Magic play, there was an incident in which one player drafted a card that was going on the secondary market for, I think, something like $600 over a card that would have worked better in his deck, but was like a 50-cent draft chaff. So,
right. And this was controversial, I take it.
Extremely controversial.
Which I find fascinating because that seems the obvious choice, right? Like,
yeah.
Why would you not take a $600
take
card?
Rent. Who cares take your rent. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Unless the tournament prizing is like so sufficient that it's going to dwarf that. Why would you not take $600? And I assume this was, if it's a well-known story, this was in like pre-COVID money.
Yes.
Fantasyland, where $600 was like, a lot of money, as opposed to like one Costco trip. So, okay. But my point being is, so I became aware of this idea of redrafting, where you play the cards and you're only drafting them for your deck, and then at the end you take all the valuable cards and you shuffle them up and you deal them back out, and everybody redrafts based on just for value, for keepsies.
Yeah. So, and this is typically
some
done
people really like it. Some people think that runs counter. And I was curious, Ned, I've never asked you, how do you feel about redrafting in Limited?
So there are a couple of different redrafting schemes. The redrafting scheme that I am most familiar with is that the pick order is largely determined by your finish, so that the people who finish better get a larger shot, get sort of an earlier shot at the money cards. And typically the distribution of value in a set is extremely Pareto, in the sense that the vast majority of cards are not worth very much. And there's a small minority of cards that are worth a lot. And
Does that mean Pareto means like the number just goes really high at the end, kind of like the
factor? It's the Pareto distribution is, you see this show up in a lot of statistics where it's like 20% of people have 90% of wealth, or these kinds of when you get
3 or
these
4
hockey stick.
Yeah, most cards in SWU are worth less than $10, and there's like 5 that are worth almost, between 50 and 100. Got it.
That have the vast majority of the value of the set. And
okay.
So I've kind of got 3 minds about it to the extent that makes sense. So the first mind that I have about it is brutal for non-enfranchised and new players, because a non-enfranchised and new player, they are not going to finish well, generally speaking. And so they are finishing poorly, and then the little equity that they would have gotten out of the draft in the form of, okay, I don't think that I can win this particular draft, but I can at least draft the cards that I want, gets ripped out from them.
Right. Yeah. Just evaporates. Yeah.
Just evaporates.
Okay.
So that's second mind is, from the point of view of draft is a dance, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to coordinate with the people near you to make sure that you all are getting the best deck that you can. Is that a very early a trap that a lot of people fall into is the idea of hate drafting, is the idea that, I'm going to take these cards that other people are going to want, so they have worse decks, and all you're doing is you're making your deck worse and their deck worse. And there are
we'll have to do a draft. We'll have to do a draft episode, but I mean, there have to be situations where that's a good trade.
There are very few situations in which that's a good trade, but generally speaking, this is a conversation, and this is me coming into it with a certain amount of baggage, and I'll be interested to see like how SWU handles it. But when you are adding in this additional meta layer of value, you are of like real monetary value or desire for particular cards, because Mary really loves villainy red, and so Mary is going to draft that really sweet. There's not a money card, palp. Yeah, that the palp every time, and so you can kind of understand how that's going to happen. That meta level makes the purity of the limited game, like it compromises the purity of the limited game a little bit. And rare redrafting does, help to make limited more of a self-contained environment that you're just thinking about the cards and you're not thinking about the value or, oh wow, this would go really great in my Grand Inquisitor deck or what have you.
Right. Okay.
So that's my second mind. And then my third mind about it is that it's for moderately enfranchised players, it has a certain appeal, right? Like beyond the purity of the game, like I don't.
You're saying so, like if you have a robust but not complete collection.
Yes, exactly.
The power of the rares, it's around the table. There's really only you just don't have a complete play set of home one.
Yes.
You've got your 3 Vaders, you've got your 3 Lukes, but you're missing a home one. It doesn't matter who. That's all you want. You just want to walk out with that one card. It's not about money. It's about being able to pinpoint.
Right. And that sort of third thing, and maybe you can solve it outside of scope with, a separate monetary transaction, but that kind of like outside of scope separate monetary transaction is also outside of the scope of this podcast, and arranging these can be difficult.
Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna I reserve the right to change my mind. My summary of my feelings on redrafting will be much shorter. I think it's dumb. I hate it. I understand the value. I mean, at that point, like, if you want to have the purity of the game, just shadow draft, right?
Yeah.
Like, just get one person to buy a box and be like, these are all going to be, Steve's cards. Steve owns all of these cards. Doesn't matter. We're, that's how you, if you're that concerned about the sanctity, and I feel like the people who get really hung up on the sanctity are Mr. Suitcases. Just have one person buy the box. Problem solved. You can afford it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge, though, Mr. Suitcase has an advantage in limited in that they can afford to play limited a lot. Yes. Right?
Yeah.
And so there's still that, like, don't, I think we have to just, there's not much to say about it other than to acknowledge that, that pervasive advantage continues even in limited by virtue of the fact that they can afford to do 10 limiteds to other people's one. So,
right.
Okay.
I mean, the classic complaint around Mr. Suitcase is that if you are a broke kid, using kid in a very broad sense to include college students, you can show up to every limited night.
But excluding broke adults in their 30s and up. They don't.
Excluding broke adults in their 30s, right? Like broke adults, the classic complaint about Mr. Suitcase is, I'm here grinding every night, and Mr. Suitcase shows up with his $300 deck and just wipes the floor with me because I don't have $300 to drop on a deck. But I can play limited every night, right? Like every month or however frequently the limited is. But Mr. Suit money can be exchanged for goods and services, and one of those things is additional games of limited.
Classic Simpsons reference. I'm gonna steal. You gave me a high-level bullet point list of the Mr. Suitcase points, but I want to interject. So related to that is, even more. So a second way to deal with Mr. Suitcase is to, and this isn't quite possible with Spark or Rebellion yet. I'm sure it's technically possible. There are active Discord conversations happening about it. Is to play Cube.
Cube. Everybody loves Cube.
I was borderline unaware of Cube a year ago. My awareness of Cube started shortly before my awareness of Star Wars Unlimited. I find the concept like absolutely fascinating. I love it so much. For those who don't know, which is probably one or two of you, Cube is the idea that you build a custom curated stack of cards. Why is it supposed to be a cube of cards? Is that why it's
typically traditionally it's a cube. But
it's not. It's impossible to make a cube with playing cards. Anyway,
No,
it's a stack of cards, and you
got like a
create
box and you put the cards in the box. But yeah, no, neither here nor there. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm really focused on the idea of why is it called cube as opposed to stack.
Because it's a classic horror sci-fi movie.
I mean, those Cube and Cube 2, great
Sphere.
movies. Cube 3, Hypercube, not as good.
Yeah.
I love Cube, the movie. You brought it up. I didn't. I wasn't even going to go there.
Yeah.
I love that movie. Just for the idea of having one set and changing the colors of the lights and having it be another room and making a whole movie about that is, well, that's pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
But the point being, for dear listener, apologies. So Cube is you have a whole stack of pre-curated cards and you build fake packs out of them and then you draft those fake packs. Boom, done.
Yep.
And the reason why I love it is that whole artistic expression, the themed cubes that everyone kind of, you want to make everybody just Imperial's cube or all villainy cube. You can do it. You can do a, all commons cube. You can do only these artists cube. But to build cubes requires the pool to be larger than it is.
Yes.
But the moment where like my
Typically.
my head just exploded. Tyler Parrott, amazing Twitter follow if you're not already.
He is a clutch.
He's the one who does all the developer insights on the cards. So there's Star Wars Unlimited value there, but he is also willing to talk about other games that he plays, which it seems to be in large part Magic. And he had this idea for a Magic the Gathering cube that he's been working on that has stickers. And I don't know the exact details, and I'm probably getting them wrong, but something like when you have you also draft sticker cards. Mm-hmm. And when you have priority in the game, you get to apply stickers to the cards, which then just stay there. And so this idea of the cube evolving over multiple drafts. Right? So now you get to play. You're like, I want the cube to go in this direction, so I'm going to apply this, a legacy cube, if you will. And I was just like, oh, man. I immediately started thinking about it in relation to SWU, which, I don't see I think in 2025, I'll start thinking about a SWU cube. But that is, obviously building a cube requires you to be somewhat of a Mr. Suitcase, but
yes,
a group can put a cube together. And especially there are themes of cubes that, if the cube doesn't have any legendaries in it, that makes it easier to build, right? Like, or you don't need, and it tends to be a singleton-ish at the higher levels. There's only one of each legendary, something more achievable, and then you don't have to spend money to play it.
Yeah,
which I think is
Cube is great. I will never say, or I will say very few rude things about Cube. The rude things that I will say about Cube is people get into large arguments about the contents of people's particular cube, and especially the Magic space. The definition of whether or not a cube meets certain criteria sometimes is loud, but Magic people are loud. So I don't know what to say.
I'm going to use the phrase again. Going 2 for 2 tonight. Dumb. Cubes, in my mind, cube is an art form, right?
Okay.
Like, it's meant to be fun. And if you've played it and you think it's fun, like, it doesn't need to be balanced, right? You're not selling it. You're not pitching it on other people. You're not foisting it. You can make a weird lopsided cube that, whatever rules you care about doesn't matter, right? Like, there's no objective cube truth. If you enjoyed it at your kitchen table, knock yourself out. And if people have a problem with that, like, get bent. Like, go touch grass. Like, I don't care. So, fair. I'm sure people can get loud, but who cares? All right.
We should do an episode about cube later when there are sufficient cards to make a cube.
Yes. I am very fascinated about cube. I have been thinking lots about cube. We will do many episodes about cube. We will probably not be the first to get to be the cube-centric podcast, but that is absolutely a sub-theme that I would love to add to the Force Unlimited. So yes,
beautiful.
We'll come back to cubes. All right. What else can you do if you are not Mr. Suitcase?
You can join an Escalation League, like I think at least one member of this podcast has.
Yes. I will be starting an Escalation League in 2 weeks after doing my first draft with real cards next week. And first week, April, I will be joining at Red Castle Games in Portland. They have set up an Escalation League. It was so fortuitous. Man, talking about them a lot tonight. D-House at Unplayable talked about his store setting up an Escalation League. And I said, what is an Escalation League? I had never heard of this. And he explained it. I was like, oh, that's so awesome. I wish I could do like that. Red Castle Games announced it mere hours later that they were doing one. I was on that like a hipster on brunch. Like, believe
Parker,
me,
as somebody who just learned about an Escalation League, would you care to describe for our listeners what an Escalation League is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So an Escalation League is sealed Escalation League. Sealed Escalation starts with sealed, which if you played pre-release, you are familiar with. And then you add a pack a week. So each week, you leave your cards. I presume you leave your cards at the store. I've never done it.
You leave your cards at the store. Yeah.
You leave at the cards at the store so you're not always secretly swapping them out.
Yeah.
And then each week you open a pack and you add to your in-store collection. And you can build a deck out of your cards in the in-store collection. You can rebuild decks. The key point is that it makes every card mean even more because it's not just the sealed, 6 packs that you think about for 40 minutes and build a deck. You're thinking about it all week. What else could I do with these cards? Like, how else do I reconfigure this deck? And the reconfigure is the part that I'm excited about, where because you're playing in a bound circle, right? I will be playing with 15 other people. That is the meta. There will be no infusions from outside of other people, other ideas, and so you can know what you're coming up against. Wow, there's like 4 people running Boba. That's a whole fourth of the table. You better be prepared for Boba or Tarkin or whatever. And so then you really can tech your deck to a very defined meta. I will acknowledge one point of concern. I don't know if this is true of all sealed Escalation Leagues, but Red Castle is starting off with 4 packs, which feels very tight.
That is very tight. 4 packs seems wild to me.
Yeah, I assumed it was going to be 6 and then 1 pack per week, but it's 4 with 1 pack per week. And my second pre-release, I could not craft a legal deck with the leaders I was given.
You could have. You just would have been paying 2 extra for everything.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I could not have crafted I said legal. I could not craft a 30-card note. There was no path to a no-tax deck for me.
Yes.
There was no deck that I could build, given my leader choices, that any deck I could figure out seemed to have, and maybe I missed it, right? Somebody's going to prove out mathematically impossible to draft 6 packs, but I couldn't find a path towards 30 untaxed cards. So it's 4. I feel like you're going to be, that first 2 weeks, you're going to be running a lot of
that's
tax.
4 is very tight, and I think that this is something that people maybe will get used to. But to give like a brief pro con of Escalation Leagues, the pro of an Escalation League is it's like limited in that everybody has the same card pool or the same access to cards, right? Like people's external amount of money that they can spend has no bearing on the Escalation League, but it has the benefit that for some people, the kind of disposable nature of limited formats feels kind of bad. And so having additional cards entering the pool and the fact that you have a deck that you're piloting week after week after week gives you more experience and more familiarity. Some people really like the feeling of like knowing of their deck. This is my deck and I have built it this way because I like this. And
there are many like it, but this one is mine.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. No, and you think about it. I mean, for me, that's where, for me, that's always been the true appeal of TCGs and LCGs, and why like deck builders have never truly resonated with me. I mean, I respect Dominion, I respect Slay the Spire, but I don't think about it in between, right? And like, I want to be thinking about my card pool all week, like looking at that photograph, like keeping track of what's in there and grabbing my own copies so that I can have like a shadow copy of my sealed card pool and be like, okay, what if I build with this? What if I build with that? That sounds absolutely delightful. And I also think it's going to hone like meta literacy skills, right?
Yeah.
Like instead of dealing with the entire card pool, 252 cards, 18 leaders, you're dealing with, all right, like, Sally over there I know what she's running because she
Mm-hmm.
drew, she draft, she opened a near, um, like constructed viable version of Leia.
Yeah.
I better be prepared, right? And so you read that's a chance to practice that meta literacy on a much smaller scale. I'm absolutely excited.
Yeah. I mean, the knock I have against escalation leagues is um, different limited formats have different amounts of luck. Like sealed is a much more luck dependent format than draft is, because draft you have more control over the cards that end up in your deck. And escalation leagues are luck, but also you have to deal with your luck for the next several months.
Yeah, no, if
So
you open
yeah.
terribly, it's like, oh great, this
Yep.
is it for the next 2 months. I have thought of that. That is a big concern. I mean, on the plus side, I'm sure for some people though they'll be just a little below the curve on luck,
Yeah.
and then they'll just they'll open boba and fire spray in one pack, and suddenly everything's changed, right?
All comes around.
So
Yep.
but there's going to be, I mean, statistically, one person out of that 16 is just going to be miserable for
Yep.
2 months.
So
So don't
that
do it
is
if you're
the
not
way that
prepared to
it's
be
going to
miserable.
happen. Yeah.
I am prepared to be miserable. I'm very prepared to just hate my deck and lose night after night. This game, I mean, people talk about how good the game is, and it is good, but this game is so good even when you're losing. Um, I think the best game of Sulu I've played yet. I played it against Lamar on the Saga League, and it was, I mean, it was sublime. We both went to empty deck, and every turn, just thinking about it, I was being ground down. I thought I was going to be able to stabilize. I just couldn't stabilize before my deck ran out. When I got crushed last night twice by uh, Green Bean, these are my most recent losses. So much fun losing. So yeah, that's. I mean, I'm sorry to effuse, but game's not just good, but I mean it's really good. You know, a game's good when you're losing, and it's awesome. If I knew. I mean, I'm going to my first draft next week. There's a high likelihood I will just lose every game I play, and I will happily spend the $18 or $17 or whatever it is to go do it. That sounds delightful. So, all right,
Beautiful.
what else can we do, Ned?
Speaking of hitting your decks, learn to love aggro and control.
Those are my second and third favorite of the three archetypes. Ned, that do not include my favorite of the three archetypes.
I did not include your favorite of the three archetypes, and that is because aggro and control decks, speaking again of the extremely broad characterization of things as aggro, control, or mid-range, aggro and control decks tend to include more commons and uncommons than mid-range decks. Mid-range decks are really trying to capitalize on the power of individual cards, and the individual cards with the highest power tend to, although not always, be rares and legendaries. Whereas in an aggro deck, you're playing a lot of crummy beaters, and those are more frequently in like common and uncommon. In a control deck, you're playing a lot of removal, and removal tends to be common and uncommon. Like occasionally you'll get a rare or a legendary. A lot of times control will play one or two high-end legendary finishers, but typically you're not even playing all the copies you can of that. You're not even playing your three copies. You're playing like one or two.
Because you're planning on dragging the game out till you find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you are willing to play aggro and control, typically your decks will end up being cheaper than a comparable mid-range deck. So if you are a person who is trying to compete with Mr. Suitcase and you are not Mr. Suitcase, I advise you to develop a love of those archetypes, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I have developed a love, from my youth, I developed a love of these archetypes because that exact reason is that you can play them with a substandard card pool.
I don't want to play mediocre stuff. Deck, Ned. It's good stuff. Deck.
Good stuff. Monster.
Okay, so all right, well, that's a simple one, but that makes sense. Hone in on an archetype that is more affordable. And I mean, I think that's that's the general advice, right? Play aggro because it's. I mean, Sabine, Green Bean's only expensive card. I mean, K2SO is marginally expensive, but
Yeah.
not that expensive.
Not
And,
that expensive. No.
Red 3 is like the topper at, I think it's like $10 right now. Like for the price of a
And
pre-release, you too can have play set of Red 3.
Right. And red 3 is not even like the best card in the deck.
No, it's just I
Yeah.
think it's clutch, right? Like everything else
Yeah.
is common. I mean that's a rare,
Yeah.
and it's not the best, but it's an important rare. And
Yes.
so in a very popular deck, so
Yeah.
it goes up to $10. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot to say about that other than
Nope.
if you can't afford all the good stuff, don't play good stuff.deck.
Don't do it.
Okay.
On the subject of not playing good stuff.deck, play weird stuff. Weird stuff.deck. So a lot of times card affordability is a function not only of the rarity of the card, but also the popularity of the card. And
We were just talking about that.
We were just talking about that. So if you are willing to play decks that are off meta, you can do a lot better than you expect. And one of the reasons for that is when you are playing a weird deck, you will have been playing against the meta decks for almost every game of your deck's existence. When somebody with a tiered deck is playing against your weird deck, this is probably the first time that they've played against you. And sometimes that advantage is enough to carry you. Now, it doesn't always work, and probably the reason why your weird deck isn't good is because it's bad.
Or
right?
it's not popular because
it's not popular because it's bad, right? But
there's that sweet spot, right? Where
Yes.
it's bad enough that it's not popular, but it's good enough that surprise plus pilot skill will get you
a lot farther. Yes, exactly. And this also, I think, appeals to a lot of people because going to the concept of the game topography, right? Like meta, there's an analogy. There's a mathematical or / computer science / algorithm that a lot of people use that is called gradient descent. And the idea is if you imagine the surface of like the Earth, right? And you drop a marble somewhere on the surface of the Earth, and then you move the marble so it's always trying to go uphill. That is the core idea about gradient descent, where you're always kind of moving it a little bit in every direction. You're finding which direction is the most uphill. And what this will tend to do is if the marble is anywhere near any kind of a hill, it will climb to the top of that hill. Right? That's what gradient descent does really well. But if you want your marble to get to the highest point on Earth, gradient descent doesn't actually do a very good job, or gradient ascent.
Right, because it'll get to the top of a hill and then there's nowhere to go to the top.
And then it stops, right? And so when
congratulations, you're on Mount Tabor. That's not K2 or Everest.
Right, exactly. Okay. And so this is why people in general will gravitate, there's this balance that needs to be struck within a larger card game meta. And this is why I really like people who play weird decks. And I try and be the person who plays a weirder deck because you don't know, nobody knows what the topography is really like. People have an idea of what the topography is like. And if everybody's congregating on the top of one hill, that might be the highest hill. It's entirely possible. But it's also possible that there are other hills out there that might not be quite as tall, but you get to be the person who climbs them.
As somebody who's been playing blue villain in spite of himself, one of the more satisfying SWU experiences has been the last week watching. So Poland had a huge showdown, and I think it was like 90-something people. And Chewy placed in the top 8. Which obviously caught a lot of people by surprise and forced a lot of smarter minds than us to really reevaluate Chewbacca.
Yeah.
As a leader. And the people who are cooking are saying it's tasting good. Like, there is actually potential there for a leader who was disparaged for a long time. But I think Chewbacca might be one of the timmiest leaders. And that is absolutely exciting because I am not somebody who's going to cook, but I'm watching what is being cooked with great interest. What do you think, Ned? This is a question you probably wish I had written down and asked you 24 hours ago. What do you think some of the weirder corners worth exploring are right now? At least
Well,
one.
I think that double yellow, the card pool might not entirely be there yet, but the double yellow cards, when I saw them, they just smelt like really, really good tempo cards. And most of these, unfortunately, villainy double yellow is more where it's at, which is gravitated more towards boba green. But the Cantina Bouncer, Mana War
Container
is a
Bouncer and Bodhi Rook are the other two. Yeah.
yeah, and Cunning as well, the event.
The
Yeah,
obvious one.
both
Yep.
of those are like card slash tempo advantage stapled to a reasonable ish body, and I feel like there is probably somewhere that can be that can be traveled to from there. I don't know if we've got it there yet, but
I think that goes to our what Ryan said last episode, that you asked Ryan what color, what can each color not do,
right,
and mildly concerningly, for yellow the answer was nothing. There's nothing that yellow
right,
can't do. It just has to
yeah,
jump through hoops. And I think you see that in the fact that double yellow, I think that is the best pool of double aspected cards. Those three
110%.
are the best double pool of double aspect cards in the worst monocolored pool overall. Like,
Mm-hmm.
those are the best three cards, but if I want to run a monocolor, I think Cunning is a hard sell, because whatever you're trying to do, doesn't matter what you're trying to do, you're jumping through hoops. Whereas if you're in mono green, you are ramping and dropping units fine. If you
Mm-hmm.
are, mono blue, you are dropping big butts and healing fine. If you are in mono red, you're doing direct damage, you're getting out lots of cheap bodies, fine. If you're yellow, whatever you're doing, you're jumping through hoops, you're setting up weird tempo to combo with other things, but you have nothing to like latch onto. So, yeah, okay. So you think that's where there's some cooking to be done?
I think that there's some cooking, and then this is just me, and I don't think that there's anything here, but I keep trying to make Steel and Sack work. So we've got enough control cards in the form of Palpatine, in the form of Treachery, to a certain extent in the form of Change of Heart, although like it being so expensive makes it hard to justify. But I feel like, and again, this might just be something that works in a limited context, but that 2-for-1 swing of being able to take your opponent's unit, use it, and then throw it away can be, for value, can be really, really juicy. I don't think that the card pool is quite deep enough to support it yet, and I don't think that it's quite come together, but like I keep
But you're
that little
watching.
pot of stew going. Yeah.
Traitorous, man. That is a card
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
keeps going up in my book. I love that card so much.
It's good. It's good.
But you also have to, you only have the Traitorous itself bounced, or the unit bounced, before you learn
Yeah.
to drive them like you stole them. So, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
What else can you do to combat Mr. Suitcase, or to acknowledge the fact that you're not Mr. Suitcase?
So here we're getting into the knots, and these are things that I have been advised by other people that I feel like are not as helpful. So the first is budget decks. Generally, when people talk about budget decks, they're not talking
So
about
you're saying
decks.
do not budget deck.
Do not try and play budget decks. And what I mean by budget decks here is not decks that are cheap. What I mean by this is Boba Green's a really good deck. Have you considered swapping out all the powerful cards for crummier versions of the cards that are cheaper?
Okay, that's a bad thing to do, you think?
In my opinion, it doesn't do what you want it to do. Where people have this vision of, okay, I can't afford the BMW, but I can get the Civic, and the Civic will still get me where I'm going. And the answer is yes, absolutely, the Civic will get you where you're going, but this isn't about cars. This is about decks. And if you are competing, you have to maximize your advantages. And if you are playing a crummier version of a tiered deck, you do not have the advantage of being a weird deck. Everybody knows what your game plan is. You don't have any like surprise lines, number one. Number two, you are not playing, you are deliberately is too strong of a word, but you are taking a deck that is at a certain tier because of the cards in it, and you are replacing them with worse cards. So you are just going to get a worse performing thing. It's like putting a lawnmower engine in the Civic instead of a Civic versus a BMW. If you want to drive the Civic, play aggro. If you want to drive, if you want to get the recumbent bicycle of control.
Don't play the cheap, weak version of the expensive deck, Boba.
Right.
Just play the deck that is already cheap.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
And people have this vision that, okay, well, I get that, and then I'm going to replace the cards. But most of the time, by the time you have bought the cheap cards, you have not substantially reduced the price of the deck, right? Like if the deck that you want to play consists of 3 Vaders or has 3 Vaders in it, and you buy literally every other card, you're still
$200 away from Vader.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas if you
Yep.
just bought Green Bean, if you just bought into like a PAL, or an item control deck, you'd be there already.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. So that is YouTube content creator misleading hype per Ned.
I mean, okay, yeah.
I mean, there's value. There's value there if the goal is, hey, you really love Boba.
I love Boba. I want to play a Boba deck. Godspeed. Congratulations. You are playing a Boba deck. But if your goal is, I am a person who is either cheap or does not have a lot of money and I want to win, what should I do? The line is not take a tiered deck and make it worse. It's do something else.
Do something else. Okay. All right.
I mean, that's my take.
We cater, I hope, dear listener, to a slightly more SWU-informed audience. We do not have a ton of dear listeners. Again, the goal has always been the McNeil Lair News Hour of SWU. If you're listening to us, you've probably listened to 3 other podcasts, so this should come as no surprise. But like my 5th grade teacher teaching me a 5-paragraph essay, always end on one of your strongest notes. What's the last thing you can do, Ned, if you are fighting Mr. Suitcase?
Do not buy packs. Please do not buy
Don't
packs.
buy packs.
Don't buy packs. Parker, can you tell us like the experience of opening 100 packs? Or you got 100 packs, right?
I got my story is not going to be as great, but so I bought 3 boxes, and my first 2 boxes were actually pretty amazing. I got 2 showcases in back-to-back boxes, which was amazing and fantastic and strong. And on a certain level, strong recommend. Buy 2 boxes that each have showcases. If you can do that, I highly recommend it. But opening the 3rd box, I had never opened boxes before Star Wars Unlimited because I never had anywhere near enough money to do so. Was fine. But I'm a tabletop board gamer. I buy $100 board games. That's fun. I did not enjoy the 3rd box. I think maximum. I think 1 box is good. 1 box of packs is probably, if you can afford it, strong.
I think that number one, just to go through the numbers and be more specific about it. A pack of cards, once it is opened, is worth less than a pack of cards. Your average pack of cards. This is opening packs is gambling. Gambling has a negative expectation value. You can sometimes come out ahead, but if you are trying to be strategic, do not gamble. Do not take the negative expectation value bet with a possible high upside. Sometimes you will have to do that, but this is not one of those cases. Number 2, the booster fun component of it is not as much as you would think. Is that I think that the booster fun of like you open up a pack and wow, look at all these cards, look at all these things that I haven't seen, and I get to look at them and touch them and like have the tactile experience of handling them. That peaks at about a box. And a box, I
Yeah.
think, is still like a lot of cards.
A box is a lot of cards. I mean, but there's
Yeah.
something said the first pack, every
Yeah.
single card you don't have.
Yes, exactly.
Right? The second pack, but the marginal return of each box
It keeps
decreases, and it
going
decreases
down
fast.
real fast.
I
And then you have
picked up.
yeah, go ahead.
I picked up 2 packs last night, and just because I won store credit at Guardian and playing at my OP, and like, what am I supposed to do with $10 of store credit? Like any board game that I care about, starting at 50.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'll just buy 2 packs. Why not? But like I knew it was very much like buying a lottery ticket. I was like, I'm basically throwing this money away, but it's store credit. It's not real money. I even opened a legendary. I opened a hyperspace legendary, but it's my 4th black one. So it's my 4th off meta legendary. Like I, in hindsight, would probably rather have my $10 back, but it was fake store credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't buy packs. Just buy singles.
Yeah. And in the event that you do end up with store credit and you do end up with your black ones, the next piece of advice is liquidate. Everything that is not going into your card, your deck of choice, liquidate it. Get your social media. Like if you go to a pre-release, you open up some real sick boxes, some real sick packs. You get your showcase palp or what have you. Take the pictures, get your social media credit, and then turn that thing into cash.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's honestly,
Yeah.
I'm not. I think that's. I've never, playing digital TCGs for a long time, playing LCGs, which had a very flat distribution of rarity, just one.
Yeah.
I get bored easily. The idea of contributing, of committing to one deck is foreign and alien to me. But I also look at people in Flesh and Blood, people playing at the top of the game, right? Who are going to these, I don't remember what they call them in that game, but like they're flying around the world to play this game.
Yeah.
And they play the same hero for like 18 months, for 2 years. They just commit. I mean, so it's clearly doable at a high level. You can pick one deck, get really good at that deck, trade into that deck, and just play.
Yep.
It's alien to me, but that's because I'm fickle and easily bored.
Same.
But it is absolutely a very viable path to high level success, I think. I mean, I think that's proven in other games.
Parker, is there anywhere that you would recommend that people go to look at the cards that they might want to purchase and then perhaps convert those into purchases of singles?
Yeah, I will say, Sweetie B, I say we, like, what is that, the royal we? God, I hate human branding. Recently rolled out singles pricing with the launch of the game. And more importantly, I get a few pennies off the top of every card that you eventually buy at Deployer Leader Gaming or other fine stores on Sweetie B, and that helps fund the site. So, please do that.
And your
if you
4th
don't wanna-
hyperspace black one.
Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of that real quick. Well, I'm not gonna get rid of the hyperspace one, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I got not within arm's reach. I have Cassian and Showcase, which I have to assume black one plays into. Red, white, control, or like high end, control mid range is coming in a future set, and I am
That's what you're
sitting
cooking.
on.
Okay.
I'm sitting on the cards. I'm not even cooking because I don't think we're going to get there till Twilight. I think maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? I don't know what Shadows of the Galaxy is going to contain, but Twilight of the Republic, I think we're going to see that with Mace Windu, right? Like Mace Windu, powerful card on its face, but you're mostly running them in Casino Han, right? Anybody who's actually running red white doesn't want to get to turn 7. You don't want to resource all the way up to, but per the devs, every color pairing will eventually map to every
Archetype.
archetype. So red, white, mid-range towards a slow mid-range deck, it will come. And I am sitting on those cards because when it comes, I'm going to play the heck out of it. Unless you have anything else, Ned, on this subject.
I think that's about it.
All right.
Just don't buy packs. Friends don't let friends buy packs.
Friends don't let friends buy packs. Where were you last night, Ned, when I was spending my store credit? Cutting quickly to our next segment. That's not how the Force works.
That's not how the Force works.
This was given to us by dear listener Jennifer. This is the same Jennifer, Ned, who opened your packs and got that $50 boba. Who I mention because I will never let you live down not coming. So for the rest of this show, anytime I have the opportunity to talk about Boba Fett or Jennifer, I will mention the fact that you left me hanging and you left valuable, expensive legendaries on the table. That is why you are known, Mr. Suitcase. Jennifer wrote in to ask about the attack pattern Delta. She is cooking a Hera deck as a Rebel fan, and green Hera is the obvious path right now in Spark of Rebellion. Future Rebels in future sets may change that math up. But if you're in double green in Hera, you look at the double green cards. And speaking of double aspect card pools, attack pattern Delta is mid, I think. Which Jennifer wanted us to talk through some of the math on how we feel about attack pattern Delta. And I definitely wanted to ask that question of you, talk about that question a little bit, because that card to me seems pretty good. As I noted recently, my favorite kind of value is the kind of value that when it goes off, it really is disgusting, right? Like, even if it requires setup. And 3 for, 6 plus 6 plus 6. I feel like you can really take advantage of that. And yet the card doesn't see a lot of play. Why do you think that is, Ned?
Well, let's kind of go through things at a couple of levels. So let's start off by comparing it to, I think, the closest comparable card, which is Tactical Advantage. Tactical Advantage is 1 resource for a single green, give a unit +2/+2. So attack pattern
it's
Delta.
3 and 1.
Yeah, it's that but better, and also that but worse. So we're just comparing these two.
That but worse because it requires you to have 3 resources in play.
3 resources in play. So if we're comparing it, it gives 1 unit +3/+3, 1 unit +2/+2. That's a different unit, and 1 unit +1/+1. That's also a different unit. So just going through, number 1, combat tricks. Combat tricks are things that improve your units on a temporary basis. These, generally speaking, are not great. They can...
And you say generally speaking across many games.
Across many games. And the reason for that is removal exists. So if I play a combat trick on my unit and then you remove my unit, I have essentially given up 2 cards worth of value, my combat trick and my unit, in exchange for 1 card worth of your value, your removal. So you are opening yourself up to a 2-for-1. And even in like a really good card advantage situation where I play my combat trick on my unit and then I am able to remove your unit with my unit, I'm still trading 1 for 1, right? I have traded my combat trick, my temporary buff, for one of your units. So combat tricks are card, and in another particularly bad case, I play my combat trick on my crummy unit in order to get it to trade with your unit, in which case I have 2-for-1 to myself, or I am playing my combat trick on my unit to get it to go in for a little bit more damage, in which case I have traded a card for some damage. So just considering these cases in order, and sorry if I'm rambling a little bit, but
No.
Either you're getting 2-for-1 by removal, super bad. you don't want to get yourself 2-for-1. Card advantage is a really, really important thing to maintain. If you're 2-for-1ing yourself, that's bad. If you are using your combat trick effectively like a removal effect, where you are using your combat trick plus your unit to eliminate one of your opponent's units, you are playing effectively a bad but cheap removal effect, right? Where tactical advantage is useful if I need to get my unit to trade up on your unit, and ideally, like, I'm using my tactical advantage, I would rather have played Strike True, right? Like, Strike True, my unit eliminates your unit, and there's not these intervening steps of my unit now needs to engage in combat with your unit, and there's not the risk of just stuff happening. So the removal, treating it as a removal spell is okay, but not very good. So again, I'm just talking about tactical advantage here. We're going to get to attack pattern delta in just a moment. The third case is I'm 2-for-1ing myself to trade my bad unit and my combat trick for your good unit. Number one, I'm 2-for-1ing yourself. This is a little bit more defensible because I'm trading my bad unit. I'm essentially trading 2 bad cards for one of your good cards. And frequently in limited or other like tight card pool situations, this is something that you have to do because you just.
But if you're in limited, you're probably less excited. You're probably less likely to be running a double aspect color, and like you aren't paying 5 for attack pattern delta.
No, one would not want to. So, and then the last case. Just last case is you are using it to deal extra damage to your opponent's base, either through an overwhelm effect or through just like I'm playing my combat trick to deal extra damage to your opponent's base. This is the case in which a combat trick is most defensible, right? Because you are essentially using it to give yourself a little bit of extra reach to get that little bit of extra damage on the base. And when you are playing aggressive decks, that can frequently be the difference between winning and losing, is getting those couple extra points. So we talked about combat tricks broadly. Now let's talk specifically about attack pattern delta. Attack pattern delta, in order to get maximum value out of it, you need to have 3 units. 3 units on the board at the same time is a lot of units. It costs 3 times as much as tactical advantage. So that's tough. It is also tempo negative. You are spending time to cause your units to get stronger. Those units are not acting, and so you are opening your opponent up to be able to do the thing that they are hoping to be able to do without interacting with them. And so you are giving up a lot of potential. You are losing tempo. You are probably not going to be getting card advantage. You might squeak out some card advantage with attack pattern delta because it's 3 different buffs. You are required, or you are not required, but having 3 units on the battlefield is tough. Having 3 units in at the same time, it's not impossible, but it's a little tough. And then the kind of coup de grace, the thing that makes it hardest is the fact that it's double green. And double green it's a really hard restriction to play with right now with the card pool.
I'm going to discount that third one, or that last
one.
I think that's immaterial.
Sure.
And the reason why I say that, and that's not entirely fair, but I'm not considering Vader in a red yellow hero deck.
Sure.
Right? Like the fact that it's off color. Sure, there are cards that are worth considering going into double for.
Right.
And attack pattern delta is not one of them.
No.
And as the card pool grows and we get more double aspected cards, that'll start to become a more interesting question. I think right now people are going into double green because you're a green hero and you want ECL.
Right.
But so I think the only reason you're thinking about attack pattern delta is you're already in double green.
Okay, so if we stipulate that you are in double green, I remove that objection about attack pattern delta.
Right.
But I will say that it is
everything else still stands.
Yeah. So I think that if I was playing a Leia double green deck and I had the ability to flood the board, where like I'm playing a lot of 1 cost and 2 cost units, we're coming in, it's turn 5, I have stuck a couple of units to the board. So again, we're trying to play to like a good case, right? Let's put ourselves in our mind palace. You know, I'm on 5 resources, so I've on turn 1 I played 2 1-cost units. On turn 2 I played like a 2 cost and a 1 cost unit, and then one of my 1 cost units got removed. So I'm sitting here now with 3 units. On turn 3,
Well, so
yeah,
I think the more salient point is, so you have a setup for it, and
yeah,
I mean, with Leia, you're able to get more value, right? Like
right,
the ideal turn is 5 resources. You bring Leia out,
yep,
and then you attack pattern delta into a rebel assault
yes,
with Leia. So now you've made up your tempo
just
loss
yep,
by attacking with all 3.
yep,
So I'm going to analogize attack pattern delta, I think, to Power of the Dark Side.
yes,
When Power of the Dark Side came out, a lot of people felt like the initial reactions were maybe, but that it left too much control to your opponent. That how often were you going to be in a situation where their ideal unit is the only unit on the board? And opinions have changed on Power of the Dark Side as people realize, wait, you can just make the trades around everything else, leaving 3 resources and their sweet unit, and
yep,
get that fantastic value. And stocks on Power of the Dark Side have gone up. And to a lesser extent, I've seen more and more people cooking with I Am Your Father, where the conventional wisdom is I Am Your Father gives a choice to the opponent, and any card that gives a choice to your opponent, they're going to choose the one that's not great for you. So it's more advantageous to them. So it's not a great card.
yeah. The pro linguistic tip on these is they're frequently referred to as Punisher cards. Ones that give your opponent
Punisher
a choice
cards.
Punisher cards. Yeah,
But I think people are cooking. I'm not saying they've come around. I'm not saying they're right.
yeah,
But people are cooking. Realize the original pro I Am Your Father argument was, well, but both those outcomes are good for 3 resources. It doesn't matter which they choose. 7 damage is for
a lot
3
of
is
damage.
great.
Yeah,
Draw 3 cards for 3 is good. So who cares? And I think that was originally discounted, and I think some people are still now really trying to cook with it. Is that loss of control? I think attack pattern delta. So I'm going to present some data, Ned.
yeah.
Your favorite kind of data.
I love data.
Anecdata.
Yes.
So I have some anecdata.
Yes.
Last night, I've now
Yeah.
played against Hera twice. 2 matches against Hera. And both times, double green Hera running reasonably low to the ground. And, you got Battlefield Marine and so forth. I feel like I was regularly staring down a double Hera who already had 3 units on the board. So I don't...
Wow.
On the one hand, I think there's the argument that is some setup. But on the other hand, between the 2 arenas, I feel like that's not that hard. You've got Sabine and Chopper who are cheap. Often running red wing leader. There's enough stuff in there, and at the 3 resources and below, the aforementioned Battlefield Marine, that there's able to establish a pretty strong foothold into things like Ezra and Kanan. That 3 units on board is not a uncommon way to start the turn. And so similarly to kind of Power of the Dark Side, if you realize that situation, you only need to play attack pattern delta once.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be viable every turn. I think there's cooking to be done with attack pattern delta.
Okay.
Because I think green is the color of units, and I think having 3 units on the board, I don't know if it's competitively viable yet, but I think it has been dismissed too aggressively too early, and I think
that's entirely possible.
I think we will see like B tier lists running attack pattern delta, and I think in the interest of like complete frankness, if you're running Hera right now, you're probably already opting in to that like B tier of deck. Possibly wrong, right? Like again, Chewie just rocketed it up, so there's cooking to be done. But I think if you're already running Hera, then you're opting into a very thematic package that's been predefined and is not large enough to allow for a lot of maneuverability. There's not a lot of choices to be made in the Spectre package currently. They've confirmed it's going to grow, and I suspect it'll grow big enough that people will get to make choices, but right now it is what it is, and you've kind of locked in. I think there's cooking to be done with Attack Pattern Delta. I don't think it's super competitive. I think you're probably just going to be happier running Rebel Assault. All the Spectres are Rebels.
Yeah.
Because
that gives you the tempo, the tempo, and you're getting 2-0, like 1-0 twice is not as good as +3 as a total +6 +6 across 3 units.
Yeah,
but
+2 +0 is less than +6 +6.
Yeah,
that's the
remarkably enough.
hardcore
Yeah.
math. Yeah, but it's 1. It costs 1, and it comes with 2 attacks. I mean, and outside of Leia, like Leia, you're building on that, but for somebody else, just being able to hit with like Chopper and Sabine, or Chopper and Ezra, get the draw, tap down their resources. I think there's a lot more value in running 3 Rebel Assaults and then asking yourself, maybe sideboard in against another go wide deck that's going to let you go wide. But I think there's cooking to be done, but probably not the best.
Yeah, to your point, and again, these are not apples to apples comparisons, but I was just quickly looking through SWODB for what 6/6 worth of power is worth on units. And the answer is about 6 resources. So if we look at like ATST or Lando, or, that amount of value is typically priced at 6. Again, but that gives you a unit, right?
Right.
So,
as opposed to asking you to already have 3. And I think that is the distinction.
Permanent stats versus temporary stats and yada, yada, yada. But like, it's not nothing. And I think that you are pointing out something that is real. That is like, that's, if you are already on a wide board, that can close out the game. And that's, going back to quadrant theory, I think that Attack Pattern Delta, it's not good when you're behind. It's not good, at parity. It can be good if you're at parity with like a big board. It's not good when you're developing. So like the parity and winning the game case. But I think that you can make a very strong argument for, if you are ahead and you Attack Pattern Delta, you can close out the game immediately.
I think it's the command reach. It's where it's reach for command. And so I guess that's going to be the final answer, dear listener, is if you find yourself regularly starting the turn with 3 units on board, if that's a common occurrence for you, where you are having to kind of math through all of your trades, I think it's worth exploring Attack Pattern Delta.
Yes.
All right, and that's all she wrote.
Stipulating that you're in double green. Stipulating that you're in double green.
Yeah, obviously.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
So that's all she wrote, dear listener. This was episode 11 of The Force Unlimited. And again, we're recording on March 22nd. If you have any thoughts about the episode, please email us at theforceunlimited@gmail.com. Do you have any final thoughts, Ned?
I do. And that is, I'm glad that I'm friends with Mr. Suitcase. Come to an accord. Yeah.
Yes, you can borrow my cards when we start staring down our showdowns in May. Okay, with that, dear listener, we will see you in 2 weeks.